This is the most authentic wilderness survival show I've ever seen.
10 hunters gather in the North American wilderness, the scariest place in Alone's history. They face notorious predators, including many black bears, and must live alongside them. As winter sets in, the cold becomes bone-chilling, presenting mental and emotional challenges. To win the $500,000 prize, they must endure hardships and rely on their survival skills. On the first day, contestants appear one after another in the most desolate area of North America.
Chilko Lake is far more dangerous than you can imagine. Contestants will face this environment alone. The high altitude and cold climate mean only those crazy for money would come here. Here, humans are not at the top of the food chain. Black bears, cougars, wolves and moose can easily take down these thrill-seekers. Chilko Lake is rich in salmon, providing plenty of food, but it also hosts grizzly bears. Bear tracks are everywhere, and just thinking about it is terrifying. Each contestant can only bring 10 items. They have two choices: starve or be carried out by the crew. They should laugh now because they might not have any tears left to cry later. As the crew's boat departs, Tim's challenge officially begins. He feels extremely nervous, and this tough guy, who could charge like a bull, actually starts crying. Tim is worried about his girlfriend at home, especially since there's a single guy, old one, next door. Tim is a full-time hunter, often hunting in the wild. He's even hunted a black bear before. While he's not afraid of bears, he does have a healthy respect for them. Tim admits he's here for the money because he has 4 kids to feed, which is more honest than those who claim they're here to challenge themselves. Tim's first 3 goals are to build a shelter, hunt, and fish. Once those are done, the only thing left is to overcome loneliness. He's not in a rush at the start. Building a shelter is hard work, so he chooses to hunt and eat first before working, which is definitely the smartest choice. Tim finds bear tracks on the ground, indicating that a black bear might be nearby, so he needs to be extremely cautious. He goes to the shore and finds more fresh bear tracks, meaning a black bear is close. Hopefully, Tim can hunt a black bear here. Meanwhile, Clays is exploring the forest, hearing bird calls and eager to hunt right from the start. This season's contestants are smarter. Clays carries a bow and arrow while exploring and finds many mushrooms, which he picks up along the way. Clays demonstrated exceptional foraging skills. Contestants who focus on food supply tend to do well, while those who mindlessly build shelters struggle. Clays, a full-time hunter with excellent hands-on skills, misses his family the most. The price for Alone is substantial, and Clays is here for the money. After searching the forest for hours, he finally spotted a grouse ahead. He drew his bow and shot it with ease. These contestants are incredible, hunting food within just a few hours of starting. He takes the grouse to the shore to prepare it. This grouse will be his dinner tonight. Although he hasn't built a shelter yet, food is far more important than a place to stay. The grouse isn't very big, but it has over a pound of meat, more than enough for a hearty meal. Tonight, it's mushroom stew with grouse. Clays builds a stone fireplace and places the mushroom and grouse stew on it to cook. Suddenly, he hears the sound of breaking wood. When he turns around, he sees a cougar nearby. They lock eyes. What's this? Love at first sight or a case of missed connections? Clays is blocking the cougar's path. If the cougar was hungry, Clays was in trouble because his gun had no bullets. Staring each other down, what was the point? The cougar left, and Clays wondered why he hadn't taken action. Was he serious? He kept thinking about how he regretted not dealing with the cougar. Meanwhile, Matt found the scenery beautiful. While organizing his gear, he spotted a moose in the water. Moose can swim, and if he could hunt it, he'd have more than enough to eat. Matt lived by the sea, skilled not only in fishing but also in making various tools. He had spent 7 years living in a wilderness shelter. Matt's survival skills are incredibly strong. For 2 consecutive years, he has been using primitive tools to make fire. He is very confident about making fire. While exploring nearby, he found a spot to build a shelter and saw a pile of bear droppings on the ground, indicating that this was bear territory. Building a shelter here would be a bad idea, so he quickly looked for another spot. Staying here even a minute longer could be life-threatening. At night, it started to rain heavily. Clays lay in his tent, feeling helpless, just hoping the rain wouldn't last too long. The next day, Bick woke up early to find water inside his tent, and he drank it directly. The weather was excellent today. Bick had already started building his shelter yesterday. He is an amateur singer who enjoys outdoor living. When he found out his wife was pregnant, he decided to join the wilderness survival competition, thinking that winning the $500,000 prize would significantly change their lives. He wanted to build a log cabin shelter, but the work would consume a lot of his energy, so finding food was equally important. There were many small wild fruits nearby, and Bick explored the area. He finds a nail on the shore, which is incredibly useful. By heating the nail, he can forge the tools he needs, repeatedly heating and hammering it. He wants to forge a knife from this nail, but it ends up consuming his entire day. On the third day, Tim wakes up early, complaining about his poor sleep last night with his head positioned downward. Today, he plans to build a shelter. There is plenty of wood nearby, and if he has the capability, he can construct a beautiful log cabin shelter. Since there were bears in the area, everyone's shelters had to be sturdy and reliable. Tim used a wood stacking method to build his shelter, which consumed a lot of wood. However, he designed it with a sloped roof, reducing the internal space but saving construction time. He also built a stone fireplace inside, making the shelter very warm. In just one day, he completed a log cabin shelter. That's incredibly fast. If it were those amateur contestants from the Danish version, it would probably take them a year. On the fourth day, Ross was by the shore, enjoying the scenery. It's the fourth day, and Ross is still taking in the scenery while living in a tent. He's searching for a spot to build a permanent shelter. As a full-time hunter skilled in fishing and trapping, Ross has an impressive hunting record despite limited wilderness survival experience. As long as he can hunt for food, surviving in the wild won't be an issue. Surviving in the wild isn't a problem for him. He found an open spot with trees to block the wind, though it's far from a water source. This spot is perfect for building a shelter. To build the perfect shelter, he didn't think twice and started chopping down trees. Winter is approaching quickly, and they don't have much time left to build their shelters. This area has a lot of grizzly bears, and every contestant wants to build a sturdy shelter. If I'm not mistaken, this season's contestants will likely all build wooden shelters. After 2 hours of hard work, he finally got the framework of the shelter up. After setting up the tent, Matt was starving. Building the shelter had sapped his energy, and he needed food fast. He heard heavy breathing and saw a small black bear. Matt yelled at it to find its mom, knowing the real danger was if the cub called for her. Bear tracks were everywhere, enough to scare anyone. Meanwhile, Tim tried to kill a grouse with rocks, regretting not using a bow. He was extremely hungry and unable to hunt. He had no choice but to try fishing. He wanted to use a metal piece to make a lure. After some modifications, he was ready. He took his fishing hook to the rocks to fish. The wind was strong, making it hard to cast his line. Eventually, he gave up on fishing. If he couldn't even catch a fish, Tim wouldn't last here. After setting up his shelter, he was very hungry. With the strong wind and no fish, why not gather some wild vegetables and mushrooms nearby to make soup? But he would rather starve than forage. Tim mentioned that his heart was racing at night, suspecting it was due to hunger. Time moved on. On the fifth day, Clays woke up around 6. He was analyzing his shelter, thinking that if another storm came, it might soak everything inside. Clays planned to improve his shelter before the next storm. The next day, Clays made a fishing rod. His hands-on skills are incredible. Before dawn, he was already fishing by the shore. After many attempts, he finally got a bite. Clays successfully caught a fish. His skills are impressive. He hunted a grouse on the first day and now caught a big fish. The fake bait he made worked perfectly, and this fish would last him 2 days. Early risers indeed get breakfast, while those who wake up at noon can only eat berries. Ross picked a lot of wild berries for his breakfast. Even if they didn't taste great, he had to eat them since food was scarce. Today, he planned to move, gathering his waterproof tarp and heavy sleeping bag, which was taller than him when packed. It was like a heavy-duty hike. Although Ross rebuilt his shelter, it still looked quite basic. It's uncertain how he will improve it in the future. For now, it seems this shelter. The toilet is decent, with a fire pit at the entrance and a roomy interior. At night, he tossed and turned, likely due to the morning berries. Feeling nauseous, he suddenly started vomiting. He couldn't sleep until around 3 in the morning and didn't rest well at all, so tomorrow is likely a write-off. He kept getting up to vomit and cough, and before he knew it, dawn had arrived. Now he's afraid to lie down, worried he'll start vomiting again. He lay there until sunrise, still feeling unwell. When Bick woke up early, he felt incredibly charming. Both sides of the nest could be used to make Indian flatbread, salty without even adding salt. The knife he forged yesterday has taken shape and just needs some finishing touches to become razor sharp. Bick calls this tetanus-prone knife troll power. He also made a bone spike that he could turn into a nose ring by piercing it through his nose. I really can't understand this guy's behavior. The wind has been very strong lately, and Tim finds the tarp in his shelter extremely noisy. Ever since he built his shelter, he's been slacking off. He hasn't caught any fish, and his hunting isn't going well either. After getting up, he went for a walk by the shore and spotted a grouse nearby. Hunger made his heart race, and he could clearly feel his body struggling. It was tough for him to make it back. Shelter, this gross everywhere, where are you?
Where are you?
My heart is pounding so hard. I don't feel right.
I don't feel right.
Oh, I just made it here.
Hang in there.
I don't want to tap out.
Just made it.
I don't want to tap out. I don't want to die.
I don't want to die.
I don't want to die.
Go away.
I'm so sorry. No, please don't tap out. I'm so sorry. Please, a level of our attack. Please.
Please. I swear.
It's chimney nails where hearts beat real hard.
I'm having severe chest pains. I think I might be having a heart
A man
attack.
is severely transported.
What the happens? I'm gonna live through this. Please don't make it home to my family.
In the end, Tim called the show crew because of his heart issues. He lay in bed, praying his heart wouldn't give out. In this environment, having a heart attack could mean the end. Ultimately, Tim chose to withdraw from the competition. Although he only lasted 6 days, it's understandable given his heart problems. So, what surprises will the remaining contestants bring us? Stay tuned for the next episode. This is the most authentic wilderness survival I've ever seen, with contestants building sturdy wooden shelters in black bear territory, spending days constructing rafts, and catching dozens of pounds of fish. One fish filled an entire iron pot. The first episode introduced 5 contestants, and the second episode continues with the other 5. On the first day, Corte arrived and immediately chose a spot to build a temporary shelter. There was a flat area, but he wanted to explore the surroundings first. Food is the top priority for survivors, and he was eager to showcase his skills on TV. His mom is a huge fan of the show, and his performance will make her proud, giving her some serious bragging rights in the village. Corte works in education and is knowledgeable about various fish species. He enjoys DIY projects and has strong practical skills. While exploring, he finds a pile of bear droppings and examines it closely, discovering insects and fruit inside, which he finds quite appetizing. The nearby grass shows signs of being trampled, likely where the bear rested, indicating the area is dangerous. He quickly decides to gather some berries and leave. After gathering some berries, Nate decided to move on. He had just arrived and wanted to explore the shoreline for resources. The flat terrain made it easy to find a spot for a temporary shelter. He placed his backpack on open ground and set out with his bow and arrow. Nate, a retired soldier, might not be the best at survival skills, but you can't underestimate him. He has decent hands-on skills and can make hunting traps. With 5 kids to support, being on the show is no small feat for him. Nate is here solely for the money. He found an animal trail, hinting at nearby wildlife. Hearing a grouse call from a tree, he carefully located it and took a shot with his bow, but missed. Calling him a noob would insult dogs. It's just the first day, so missing isn't a big deal. He'll likely miss more shots. After many male contestants, a female finally appeared. Teresa, a 39-year-old Stone Age expert, was thrilled with the environment and began exploring the resources around her. Claiming to be an expert in the Stone Age, people often say experts are usually amateurs, but Teresa has a PhD, making her a genuine expert. She is very skilled in using stone tools and has extensive experience in outdoor survival. Despite having lived with dozens of boyfriends, as long as she's not married, she's still a maiden. While exploring the shore, she picks and eats any edible plants she finds. Teresa is the first contestant to start eating right away. She also discovers bear droppings on the ground and squats down to study them. Every contestant has found bear droppings, which shows. He found an open spot and decided to build a temporary shelter there. Then he went to the shore, started a fire, and boiled a pot of water to drink. Why not fish with all that time? The next day, while boiling water, Michelle discovered a roasted cricket. In the wild, such food is rare and valuable, high in calories and fat. Michelle popped it into his mouth to taste. These foreigners are quite peculiar. They won't eat fish heads or chicken feet but will munch on bugs. Michelle lived with the natives for 4 years. With extensive snow survival experience, he is skilled in making hunting traps and cooking in the wild. He also built a shelter where he lived for many years. The contestants on Alone are indeed very capable. Michelle searched for food along the shore, finding plenty of wild onions. If he had meat, these onions would make a delicious seasoning. He collected a bunch to eat and picked many berries. While tasting the berries by the shore, he spotted a black bear bathing nearby. The proximity was terrifying, so he quickly found a place to hide. Running into a black bear in the wild is definitely not ideal. Without a hunting rifle, there's no way to take it down.
Luckily, the bear doesn't notice him. Meanwhile, Teresa is making a comb. Can you believe it? She's weaving a comb out here. Isn't she worried about her safety while trying to look good? She picks a spot by the shore for her permanent shelter. With the strong winds, she opts for a sunken shelter. Building a pit house is tough, especially without proper tools. Teresa clears the area with wood and starts digging with a sharp stick. This project will surely leave her arms sore. While digging, he found some larvae and immediately popped them into his mouth, using them as bait. Wouldn't fishing be a better idea?
These larvae are rich in protein, and he found them quite tasty. After a few hours, he finally dug a half-meter deep pit. The soil was loose, making it easier to dig, but there were many large rocks, which made the task exhausting. Despite that, the progress was pretty fast. On the third day, Jordan found a lot of ants in the wood. These ants are a great source of protein, and if there are enough of them, they could be a meal.
Aren't ants full of germs? Eating them directly, isn't he afraid of getting sick?
Today, his goal is to build a shelter, which is Jordan's specialty. As a professional carpenter, he excels at making various tools from wood, and there is plenty of wood here. Jordan plans to build a small cabin with a single pitch roof.
Every contestant wants to build the perfect shelter. However, building a shelter from the start requires skill and must be balanced with food gathering.
Jordan notches each piece of wood to make stacking easier, speeding up the overall progress. He is very confident in his challenge.
Around 10 at night, the shelter.
Heavy breathing sounds come from outside, and a black bear appears nearby.
Anyone timid would be scared to death.
On the fourth day, Jordan notices branches broken by the bear, about 25 meters from the shelter. A sturdy shelter is crucial, so he hurries to finish it. Meanwhile, Corte has been trying to start a fire by friction for days, even though he has a fire starter.
Now he can't even boil water.
Fire by friction is labor-intensive. The wood spins rapidly to create embers, which are then placed in tinder to start a fire. At this moment, Corte feels all the pressure release. With fire, he can boil water, and the next task is to get food. He wants to build a boat to fish in deeper waters. If he succeeds, Corte will have an endless supply of fish.
Corte felt all his stress melt away.
With fire, he could boil water to drink.
His next task was to get food.
He wanted to build a boat to fish in deeper waters. If he could make the boat, he'd have an endless supply of fish. Nate had gathered a lot of wild mushrooms and strung them up to dry, but relying on mushrooms alone wasn't sustainable. He planned to start fishing and wanted to make an automatic fishing tool to save time. He used a red string as a lure, which was convenient but had a low success rate.
Why not just dig for worms to fish?
Nate took his fishing rod to the shore, ready to set up his fishing hook.
Whether he caught anything would be down to luck.
On the fifth day at dawn, Teresa heard a bear growling near her shelter, scaring her so much she couldn't sleep.
In the morning, she found bear tracks on the shore, bigger than a human foot.
Teresa guessed a bear lived nearby and knew she had to hurry to finish her shelter. After digging the pit, she needed to secure the wooden stakes for the roof. She collected wood from the shore, which was more cost-effective than chopping it down. A young woman carrying 100 pounds of wood.
Even I, a tough guy, have to give her props.
Teresa placed the wood in the pit's center, then filled it with gravel and sand to secure the pillars. She added wood around the edges as a shoe rack and just needed to lay waterproof fabric to finish the structure. It was sturdy and perfect for a permanent shelter. Jordan tried fishing from the rocks, but the waves were too strong, and he wasn't skilled at fishing. He had to give up building the shelter, which drained his energy.
Now, finding food quickly was the top priority.
Jordan found an abandoned can on the shore but couldn't think of a use for it at the moment. The sky in the distance started to darken, signaling an approaching storm. He was far from his shelter and needed to get back before the rain started, or it would be dangerous. The waves grew stronger, knocking him down several times, but he eventually made it back to the shelter safely. He was cold and exhausted, highlighting the importance of a perfect shelter. On the sixth day, Michelle made a chair, and sitting on it felt incredibly comfortable. Today, he plans to build a permanent shelter. This spot was quite good for a shelter. He intended to build a tripod-style shelter by tying the tops of the wood together and spreading the legs to form a tripod. The hardest part was setting up the tripod. Once that was done, he just needed to place a horizontal beam in the middle and lean the wood against it to form the shelter's slanted roof. Finally, he would cover it with a waterproof tarp, creating a spacious and comfortable shelter. Corte had been busy making a raft for the past few days, and today he finally finished its structure and covered it with a waterproof tarp.
This completes the raft.
He moves the finished raft to the shore.
If it can float successfully, Corte's fishing plan can be realized.
He inserts small branches into the body of the raft to make it sturdier. After a lot of effort, he finally completes the small boat. He also needs to make a paddle, which he carves directly from wood. These contestants are really skilled with their hands. Next, he will test the raft's buoyancy.
The waves were relatively calm, but the small boat swayed a lot. It was quite a struggle to get on it, and although it could float, it wasn't very stable. Corte worked hard to stabilize the boat, and it seemed to be working well. With this boat, he could reach the ideal fishing spot. Overall, the test was fairly successful. On the 7th day, Nate sat on a log early in the morning and saw a squirrel stealing mushrooms. Before he could get close, the squirrel ran away. Nate's progress was the slowest. He hadn't started building a permanent shelter or hunted any food. He planned to build an A-frame shelter. Building a shelter takes a lot of wood, and hauling it is tough work. Nate set up a frame and covered it with a tarp. For such a big guy, his small shelter shows he's not too serious. Yesterday, he set a fishing rod by the shore, and now he's checking it. He pulled in a big fish, probably 5 or 6 pounds, really lucky. This fish will feed him for 3 days. He cleaned it by the shore, and its belly was full of bones. A whole fish makes a pot full of soup. Do out there floating? I can like to move in and reset it. Got a fish? Oh my god, that is a boat trout set line word Toja. My shelter is built, so everything is working out. What other surprises will the contestants bring us? Stay tuned for the next episode.
So everything is working out.
This is the most authentic survival experience in the history of Alone. Contestants are surviving in black bear territory and have built sturdy wooden shelters to protect themselves from bear attacks. Each contestant's skills are impressive, creating increasingly attractive shelters and even making fish head soup. On the 7th day, Bick wakes up early and decides to modify his clothes. He cuts a piece of fabric to use as a headband, which can also wrap around his arm. The sleeveless shirt now hangs under his armpit, finally giving off a charmingly rugged vibe. Today's plan is to Bick has been focusing on his shelter from the beginning, wanting to finish it quickly so he can start gathering food. The shelter just needs a roof to be complete. Bick spends the morning building the roof structure with wooden sticks and finally completes it. Standing there, he notices the wind blowing from the water and uses branches to block the side of the shelter. Adding some deadwood to secure Bick's shelter was a bit unexpected but turned out to be quite perfect. Meanwhile, Clay has also finished building his new shelter. He pulls out a pair of pink shorts, something he never dared to wear at home but feels free to do so in the wilderness. He wore them only once and now plans to repurpose them into a storage bag. The next moment, he puts the shorts on his head, and I couldn't help but laugh. He hangs his food in a tree to prevent bears from stealing it. The shelter is done, but he still needs to build a fireplace. Winter is coming to this area, and the winds can get pretty strong. Clay collected some moss and stuffed it into the gaps in the wood, which not only helps with insulation but also improves the chimney's draft. This 6-foot-tall guy made such a detailed shelter, even smearing mud around the chimney to prevent the wood from burning. Next, he tested the chimney's draft, and the fire burned brightly, indicating the fireplace was a success. If he can keep his food supply steady, Clay might just win this thing because he's not acting like a mere bystander. This episode's contestants are all really strong. The contestants this season are all very strong. Matt has built a wooden shelter and is now focused on gathering food. He found a lot of wild onions nearby. While wild onions are usually just a seasoning, they can be a meal if you have enough. While digging them up, the nearby grass caught fire, but he managed to put it out in time. If it had caused a wildfire, the show's insurance wouldn't have covered it. He chopped the onions and put them in a pot. Today's lunch is wild onion soup, using whatever food he has.
Whatever food you have.
And that's about it. Survivors, still just a few simple ingredients to make a meal when doing survival. On the 8th day, Bick's shelter was still not finished. Today, he plans to continue improving it. He wants a wooden bed raised off the ground, which can be done by propping up some wooden planks. It's quite comfortable to lie on, but that's not enough. He collected a lot of pine branches and spread them on the bed as a mattress, making it even more comfortable. He covered it with a waterproof cloth, and now he has a wooden shelter that can withstand black bears. Alright, having this shelter means Bick has entered high society. The weather was great today, so Bick moved all his stuff into the new shelter. Although the entrance was a bit low, it should be quite cozy once he got used to it. Clay had just woken up and planned to hunt today. His shelter was very spacious, so he could now focus on food. He took his bow and arrows and went into the forest to look for prey. As a professional hunter, he identified the spots deer liked the most. On the ground, he found bear droppings, which made him tense up immediately since bears are the most dangerous animals here.
There are a lot of dead trees around, likely from a past fire. The ground is littered with fallen logs, making it tough to walk. After circling the area, he finds no trails. Clay thinks this used to be a deer hunting spot, but it's now destroyed. He's at a loss for what to do next. Today's hunting plan is another failure. If I were Clay, I'd spend half the day hunting and the other half fishing. In the jungle, he finds a tree with bear claw marks and hears a bear's roar nearby. The bear was just a few meters away, so for safety, he decided to head back to the shelter. On the 9th day, Jordan took a walk by the shore. The weather was so nice that he even considered taking a bath. The water looked clear, but it was quite cold, and staying in it too long would make him shiver. He had been working on his shelter for several days, progressing slowly. As a carpenter, he probably had higher standards, making sure every piece of wood was neatly sawed. Striving for perfection might not be the best idea. After finishing the basic structure, he added a door to the shelter, and slow and steady, it turned out beautifully. Dick stood at the doorway, admiring the view of the lake, though he couldn't catch any fish there. Luckily, his chubbiness made the lack of food feel like a forced diet. But to win, he couldn't just endure hunger. Jordan decided to go hunting, hoping to catch a grouse. Standing by the shore, he eyed the distant landing point. The water was clear but cold, making swimming risky. However, being a frequent swimmer, he braved the cold and swam across, only to find the area unsuitable for hunting. He had to swim back, wasting energy and time. However, Jordan was quite heavy and a frequent swimmer, so as long as he wasn't afraid of the cold, swimming across wouldn't be a problem. He eventually made it across and scouted the area, but it wasn't suitable for hunting. With no success, he had to swim back, wasting his energy. He didn't try fishing, wasting time instead. Meanwhile, Ross was making fishing tools, as fishing was the simplest form of hunting. Although his fishing rod was primitive, as long as he could get the hook in the water, it was all down to luck. In the evening, at night, Ross heard footsteps outside his shelter. A black bear appeared nearby. Luckily, Ross hadn't done anything to attract attention. He held his rifle, ready to attack at any moment. Even though the bear eventually left, he was too scared to sleep. On the 10th day, Michelle was at the shore early in the morning, reporting the weather with a wooden microphone. The waves were huge today. Seeing this silly woman, I felt like my eggs shattered all over the place. Although Michelle had built a shelter, it wasn't fully completed and was barely livable. He dug up a root. He roasted the root to eat, and the taste nearly knocked him out. Muttering about fishing, he chopped down a slender branch to use as a rod. He tied a fishing line to it and slowly moved it out, hoping it would work. Matt sat by the shore, killing time. He didn't feel very lonely here. Suddenly, he saw something swimming in the distance. It was a black bear. Even though it was far away, it made him nervous. With his shelter already built, it was time to focus on hunting. He grabbed his bow from the shelter. He found that the bowstring had been chewed through by a mouse. The bow was his main hunting tool, and without it, he couldn't hunt. This mouse had no morals, destroying other people's things like that. Reporting it would make Matt seem petty, but not reporting it wouldn't get him any compensation. Matt had no choice but to accept his bad luck and tried to tie the bowstring with a thin rope. He tried it a couple of times, and it seemed okay for now, but he wasn't sure how it would hold up in actual use. At night, Matt decided to make a mousetrap, vowing to make the mouse pay dearly. Using some branches, he made a small trap which was held down by a heavy stone weighing over 10 pounds. The little mouse was destined to be crushed, but it would take some time. On the 11th day, Michelle discovered that his hair seemed to have a life of its own. He hadn't washed it since arriving, and now it was full of lice. He had been so busy building his shelter that he hadn't gone hunting or fishing. Now, he was feeling extremely hungry and unwell. Despite his hunger, he kept working on his shelter. These contestants would rather starve than give up. Don't feel sorry for her, she was too weak from hunger to work. She'd been eating wild parsnip, which looks like water hemlock, and thought she might be poisoned. She grabbed some charcoal to neutralize it. If she was poisoned, Michelle would soon quit. On the 12th day, she woke up at 5, drenched in sweat and feeling awful. She felt like vomiting but managed to gather herself. By morning, she felt better and sat by the shore drinking water. Stop sitting around and catch some fish. Jordan had been eating berries for days. Eating berries. Today, he plans to spend a few hours fishing. Standing on a log, he casts his line and, to his surprise, catches a fish. This makes him incredibly happy. Jordan catches a large trout, enough to sustain him for 3 days. Clay has also been eating berries lately but hasn't given up on hunting, going out almost every day. He collects dozens of pounds of berries, moves a log, digs a hole in the ground, lines it with wooden planks, and covers it with moss. Clay wants to store the berries underground to keep them fresh. Jordan starts Preparing a feast, he plans to pick berries and make a soup with mushrooms. A pot of bull trout head soup with a 2-pound fish head, half a pot of water, and some grass roots to remove the fishy smell. The fish head is used for the soup, and the remaining fish meat is saved for later. He also made a smoker to preserve the fish. To prevent bears from stealing it, he plans to stay nearby tonight to guard it. Jordan brings the fish soup to the shore and enjoys today's fish feast. It's the best meal he's had since arriving, perfectly balancing meat and veggies, and it tastes incredible. What will the contestants surprise us with next? Stay tuned!